Starmer grossly mishandled the riots in the summer. These were sparked, of course, by the killings of 3 young girls in Southport and a stabbing of 10 other people on July 29th. The whole thesis of the government was that far-right thugs were using the killings as an excuse to commit violence, and this had been optimized by misinformation circulating online. It is true that seemingly baseless claims were posted on the LinkedIn account of a local man, Eddie Murray. One now deleted post said, "BBC News are lying. The suspect was from Africa. He was on MI6 watch list. His name is Arabic-sounding name." Murray may have been referencing some other sources, but these are unknown. Another post, the one widely replicated and shared 3 hours after the attack, read, "My 2 youngest children went to holiday club this morning in Southport for a day of fun, only for a migrant to enter and fatally wound multiple children. My kids are fine. They are shocked and in hysterics, but they are safe. If there's any time to close the borders completely, it's right now. Enough is enough." The BBC claimed Murray's children did try to go to the dance class, but were turned away because it was overfilled. The second post was later deleted, but had already been copied and pasted by many accounts on different platforms. One of these was the Twitter account of an amateurish Indian news site, Upark News, with the caption, "A parent confirmed the knife-attacked suspect was a migrant." Meanwhile, Bernie Spofforth, owner of a large X account, appeared to have seen Murray's posts. Spofforth tweeted, "Southport, if this is true, then all hell is about to break loose. Southport stabbing suspect, name, was on MI6 watch list and was known to Liverpool Mental Health Services. He was an asylum seeker who came to the UK on a boat last year." Note she writes, "if true," which is a clear qualifier covering her from committing libel or prejudicing a case. Neither does she encourage any violence as a reaction. It is for these reasons Spofforth was not prosecuted, and rightly so. Nigel Farage had made similar qualified comments, for which he was castigated and scapegoated for causing the riots, but there is no legal case there. Like Murray did with his post, Spofforth took it down, but she was still arrested and spent 36 hours in police custody. Others spreading the Murray post, along with their own commentary, were Paul Golding, leader of Britain First, Nicholas Lissack and Lawrence Fox. None of these outright said that the suspect was an asylum seeker or migrant. Lawrence Fox came closest by saying, "Close the borders, do it now." However, this is implying the suspect is a migrant, not a direct statement of fact. Andrew Tate released a video which did outright state it, but he was not in the UK, thus was not subject to UK law. So, an undocumented migrant decided to go to a Taylor Swift dance class today and stab 6 little girls. That's right, somebody arrived in the UK on a boat. Nobody knows where he's from. So what did these posters get wrong? The suspect's name was incorrect. He was not a recent asylum seeker or, as far as we know, on anyone's watch list. The real suspect was not technically a migrant, in the sense he was born in Britain to Rwandan parents and is a citizen. However, Axel Rudakabana clearly has a cultural, ethnic and familial connection to Rwanda, or Africa, and in that sense he is not British. Immigration is still a relevant issue to discuss in relation to his alleged crime. None of these originating claims explicitly say the suspect was a Muslim or Islamist, although the Arabic-sounding name does suggest this. Neither do they say he had a terrorist motive. It was other people that publicly made this assumption. The most prominent was Wayne O'Rourke, owner of the Sick of It All X account. Rourke was jailed for 3 years, not simply for saying this, but for inciting violence in other posts. It did indeed appear to be incorrect that the suspect was a Muslim. Rwanda is overwhelmingly Christian after all. Yes, he could have been a convert, but it seemed unlikely. As for the terrorist motive, almost immediately the police had stated, and still state, that the Southport attack was not deemed to have one. 3 months later, there was a huge development. On October 29th, it was announced Rudakabana would be officially charged with offences under the Terrorism and Biological Weapons Acts, because police had found in his home an Al-Qaeda-produced document and a quantity of ricin, the lethal poison popular with terrorists. These charges were heard in court on October the 30th. They are separate from the murder and attempted murder charges made on August 31st. We must tread carefully here, and must not suggest the two things are connected, nor suggest the suspect is guilty of any offence. There has to be a fair trial, and by the letter of the law, he is innocent until proven guilty. The line the police are taking is that motive does not need to be proven under the Terrorism Act. For an offence to be considered terrorism, meanwhile, they say motive does need to be proven. The Chief Constable of Merseyside remarked, "The matter for which Axel Rudakabana has been charged with under the Terrorism Act does not require motive to be established. For a matter to be declared a terrorist incident, the motivation would need to be established." I will leave it to legal experts to debate the technicalities of law here. Suffice to say, once the trial has been held, the facts might cast a light on what was misinformation and what wasn't. It may also place a question mark over arrests, prosecutions, or convictions relating to people deemed to have been spreading it. Did the misinformation, or at least unfounded information, lead to the riots? Did it make certain places or people the targets of protests and rioting? You could say yes. Mosques and asylum seeker hotels were certainly targeted. Then again, perhaps it was inevitable that these places received the focus of the rioters, seeing as violent crime, mass immigration, the asylum crisis and radical Islam are inextricably linked in many people's minds. It was not right, of course, nor was it right for police to be targeted. But if we're trying to understand what happened, we can't dismiss this perception. Did the riots really require some social media users getting the details wrong? We should also point out the bottom line. The only ones responsible for violence were the people doing it. Misinformation might have stoked the atmosphere, but it didn't put a brick in anyone's hand or set a wheelie bin on fire. There was also unfounded information on the government, mainstream media and counter-protester side. The protests and riots were deemed far-right, despite only 2 confirmed extremists having been seen in attendance, a former member of the proscribed Patriotic Alternative and a man with a swastika tattoo. Nick Lowles of Hope Not Hate tweeted there were reports of a Muslim woman being attacked with acid, which was amplified by many leftists, including a Labour MP, before police dismissed the rumour as false. It was widely suggested, or outright stated, that the English Defence League, EDL, was present, despite having been disbanded a decade ago. There were the claims Farage or Tommy Robinson had caused the riots, contrary to anything they'd said. Then there was the intelligence, again from Mr. Lowles, that there were protests and riots planned at asylum-related sites across the country. This was used to mobilise the hard-left renter mobs to come to the rescue and provide a propaganda victory. All of these aspects can be deemed to have stoked tensions and influenced violent individuals within the counter-protesters. There were many videos during the riots seemingly showing Asian Muslims attacking or remonstrating with white people. Some of these assailants could be held shouting about the EDL and the acid attack. In the case of the Lowles intelligence, the apparent misinformation put a lot of people on the streets and risked more disorder. As for this notion we should watch what we say in case we prejudice the case or end up in trouble, indeed we should. But we should also note that the Home Office tweeted out a video of a rioter being arrested, describing the individual and others like him as criminals, despite no trial having taken place. This followed Starmer and every modern leftist repeatedly calling the people on the street rioters, far right, and all manner of things, even when no court cases had been held. Where was the caution then? Motive had been ascribed before anyone had been tried. But those people were the political enemy, remember. See also what happens whenever there is a white man suspected of an outrage against people from an ethnic minority. The suspect can be designated as a terrorist or far right, sometimes within hours. We should look now at the announcement of the terrorism charges. It is inconceivable that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister did not know about the items found in the suspect's home. The police likely found them mere days after the Southport killings. The discovery of these items, and the charges they incurred, must have been kept out of the public domain so as not to further inflame the riots, which were already beginning. Perhaps the government wanted to be able to deny the allegations being made about the murder suspect's motives and background. They must have known, and they chose not to tell. Farage was right that they were keeping something from us. The police claim that the charges were arrived at after lengthy and painstaking investigations, which took 4 months. I am very sceptical about it taking that long, if the paraphernalia was just sitting there. The government insists sentencing is nothing to do with them and is up to the CPS. Surely there is no strategic collusion between the two. In other news, I have purchased a bridge. The authorities had to announce the charges at some point, but it is almost certain that they stalled them until the riots had been quelled and much time had passed. According to the Guido Fawkes website, Guido was going to break the story of the imminent charges on Friday 25th of October, but was lent on by the authorities to wait until Tuesday the 29th. Instead, Guido Fawkes simply reported that there was a delay. Why did this delay happen? Most probably because the fugitive Tommy Robinson had decided to return to the UK and hold a protest on Saturday 26th. It appears the authorities didn't want to foment trouble there, so they sat on the story. It was reported that 2,000 riot police were on standby following the announcement, which shows their level of concern. The announcement also came close to 2 huge events: the budget, October the 30th, and the US election, November the 5th. The tactic was probably to try and bury the bad news under these, naive though that might sound. Some even suggest the opposite is true, that the charges were announced to distract from the budget and how poor it was. Is there a legitimate reason for doing such a thing? Does the government have a responsibility to uphold stability? Obviously there are national security concerns, and the state by law can mandate a secret. If a secret being known would risk the lives of British forces or agents, lose a war or wreck a vital treaty, then it would be legitimate for a government to keep it under wraps. This, however, was in the public interest. The crime in Southport touched a raw nerve, hitting at something we hold dear, our children. If we were told the suspect was also allegedly involved in terrorism, it might have informed us of the potential wider threat, allowing us to be more vigilant and able to make informed decisions about our safety. Let's take an unrelated example. There was a terrorist murder and stabbing in Hartlepool on October the 15th, 2023. A pensioner was stabbed to death by a Moroccan asylum seeker enraged about Gaza. All press reporting on the incident was banned by a government D notice. It was only when the trial was over on May the 17th, 2024, that the details were released. This move, I venture, was not about protecting the integrity of the case. It was about managing the public reaction, either to shield the government from embarrassment or stop anger rising on the streets. The affair shows it is not only Labour who engage in the secrecy game. The widespread hostility towards Starmer, needless to say, has only worsened in the light of the new Southport development. Once again, he has appeared out of touch with public anger and public concerns. All he can do now is say we should let the police and the CPS do their jobs and wait for a trial to establish the facts. He has been perceived as an elitist technocrat, managing and manipulating the people rather than leading them. Because what the concealment of these terrorism charges say is that the state, politically led by Starmer, does not trust us to know what's happening in our country without turning to violence or extremism. It suggests we do not deserve to know about the potential threats facing us and our families. It reduces us to impotent pawns, awaiting in ignorance to suffer for the state's policy failures. It also suggests that, in general, the government is losing control of crime and certain kinds of religious political fanaticism. Their solution? Cover up any suggestion it is happening. Even though it is obvious to those of us who pay attention, they are banking on the average normie not being aware. These folks are expected to go to work, create tax revenue, come home, watch trash TV, and not worry about their society teetering on the abyss. Perhaps to some extent this is working. Observe how the story, though it flared angrily for a few days, has been semi-forgotten while we await the trial in January. When the verdict is reached, the story may be briefly resurrected, but I fear it could soon slide away again and be one more tragedy in a terrible growing list.